The first shot rang out just before dawn, jolting Ophelia Sinclair from her fitful slumber beneath the twisted branches of a cottonwood. Her parched lips cracked as she tried to call out, but 3 days without proper food or water had left her voice as barren as the Montana Territory stretching before her. It was the summer of 1876, and Ophelia's journey west had become a desperate fight for survival. The stagecoach robbery 2 days prior had left her stranded, stripped of everything but the tattered blue dress clinging to her frame. At 22, she had been too stubborn, too determined to forge a new life as a schoolteacher in Helena to consider the dangers that lurked on the frontier. Another shot echoed across the plains, closer this time. Ophelia tried to stand, her legs buckling beneath her as a wave of dizziness swept through her body. The world tilted sideways as she collapsed, her vision narrowing to a pinprick of light against the brightening sky. Her last coherent thought before consciousness slipped away was that she would die here, alone and forgotten in this vast, unforgiving wilderness. Owen Bradley had been tracking the band of Blackfoot raiders since they'd hit the stagecoach near Lewiston. As the territory's most reliable tracker, he'd seen his share of tragedies on the frontier, but something about the description of the missing passenger, a young schoolteacher headed to Helena, had stirred something in him. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of his sister, who died of cholera 5 years ago. Or perhaps it was simply that, at 30, Owen had grown weary of the violence that seemed to follow him. He'd picked up her trail the previous afternoon's small footprints heading in the wrong direction, away from any settlement. The woman clearly had no experience with wilderness survival. As the morning sun crested the eastern hills, he spotted a splash of blue against the golden grass. Dismounting from his dun-colored stallion, Dust, Owen approached cautiously, Winchester rifle at the ready. She lay crumpled beneath a cottonwood, her chestnut hair fanned out around a face as pale as winter moonlight. For a terrible moment he thought he'd found only her corpse, but then he caught the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Kneeling beside her, Owen assessed her condition with practiced efficiency. Dehydration, exposure, hunger. No visible wounds, but her situation was dire nonetheless. Without hesitation, Owen retrieved his canteen from his saddle. Cradling her head gently, he trickled a small amount of water between her cracked lips. Her eyelids fluttered, but she remained unconscious. Too much water too quickly would do more harm than good. He dampened his bandana and pressed it to her forehead, her skin burning with fever despite the morning chill. From his saddlebag, Owen produced jerky, hardtack, and a small bundle of dried apples provisions that had sustained him through countless journeys across the territory. He worked methodically, creating a small camp around the unconscious woman. Building a fire, he melted a bit of jerky into a broth that would be easier for her weakened body to accept. The sun had climbed higher when Ophelia's eyes finally opened, revealing irises the color of summer sage. She stared at him without comprehension, then flinched away when he offered the tin cup of broth. "Easy now," Owen said, his voice rough from disuse. "You're safe." Ophelia tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. She accepted the cup with trembling hands, sipping cautiously at the warm liquid. As strength gradually returned to her body, clarity returned to her eyes along with wariness. "Who are you?" she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Name's Owen Bradley, territorial tracker." He gestured toward the badge pinned to his weathered leather vest. "Found you half dead." The stagecoach. Ophelia began, memories flooding back. "They took everything, my trunk, my money." She faltered, fresh despair washing over her face. Owen simply nodded, returning to his task of tending the fire. He wasn't a man of many words, preferring action to conversation. "Rest now. We'll ride for Lewiston when you're stronger." "Lewiston?" Confusion creased her brow. "But I need to reach Helena. The school term starts in 2 weeks." Owen didn't respond immediately, assessing the woman before him. Though she'd nearly died, determination still burned in those sage-green eyes. "Helena's 4 days' ride if the weather holds. You're in no condition for that journey today. Ophelia straightened her shoulders, pride evident despite her weakened state. I didn't come all the way from Boston to give up now, Mr. Bradley. A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. Never suggested giving up, madam, just delaying. He handed her another piece of softened jerky. Eat, build your strength. Throughout the day, Owen maintained a respectful distance, attending to his horse, cleaning his weapons, and scanning the horizon periodically. He offered food and water at regular intervals without conversation. Ophelia observed him through half-closed eyes, noting the efficiency of his movements, the alertness in his posture even when at rest. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold. Owen considered the question, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's what needs doing," he said simply. That night, wrapped in Owen's spare blanket beside the fire, Ophelia slept deeply for the first time in days, her dreams filled with images of the silent man whose unexpected kindness had saved her life. Morning brought renewed strength to Ophelia's limbs. She awoke to find Owen already up, brewing coffee over a small fire. Without a word, he handed her a tin cup filled with the strong, bitter liquid. "Thank you," she said, accepting both the coffee and the hardtack he offered. "Not just for this. For saving my life yesterday." Owen nodded, his gaze meeting hers briefly before returning to the horizon. "Raiders are headed north. We should be safe, but best to reach Lewiston by nightfall. My position in Helena will still be there in a few days," Owen interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "First town is Lewiston. You need proper food, rest, and fresh clothing." Ophelia wanted to argue but recognized the wisdom in his words. Her dress was torn and filthy, and despite the food and water he'd provided, weakness still trembled in her muscles. "Very well, Mr. Bradley. I'll follow your lead to Lewiston." Owen helped Ophelia onto his horse, then mounted behind her. The proximity was improper by any Eastern standard, but necessity overruled propriety in the Montana territory. She sat stiffly at first, hyper-aware of the strong arm that occasionally steadied her when fatigue made her sway. As they rode, Ophelia gradually relaxed, the rhythm of the horse's movement and Owen's solid presence lulling her into a state between wakefulness and sleep. He maintained his silence, but it no longer felt uncomfortable. Instead, there was a reassuring quality to it, as though words were superfluous in this vast landscape. "Have you lived in Montana long?" Ophelia asked, breaking the silence as they stopped to water the horse at a shallow creek. "Born in Kentucky, came west after the war." The brevity of his response might have seemed rude from another man, but from Owen it felt like a significant revelation. "The Civil War," he nodded once, his expression remaining impassive. "Fought for the Union. 15th Kentucky Cavalry." Ophelia sensed the weight behind those simple words, stories of hardship and loss he chose not to share. "My father and brother both served as well. Father didn't return. Thomas came back, changed." For the first time, Owen's stoic expression softened slightly. "War changes a man. Some wounds don't show." "Is that why you came west? Because of those invisible wounds?" Owen helped her back onto the horse before answering. "Partly. East felt too crowded after, too many ghosts." He mounted behind her. "What brings a Boston schoolteacher to Montana?" Ophelia was surprised by the question, the first he'd initiated. "Adventure, I suppose. A chance to build something meaningful," she hesitated. "And perhaps my own ghosts to escape." He made no further inquiry, respecting the privacy of her past as she had respected his. They continued their journey, the silence between them now companionable rather than awkward. By mid-afternoon, Ophelia's strength began to wane again. Without comment, Owen adjusted his position, allowing her to lean back against his chest. She should have protested such impropriety, but exhaustion overruled her Boston sensibilities. "Rest," he said, his breath warm against her hair. "I've got you." Those simple words, spoken without pretense or expectation, touched something deep within Ophelia. In Boston, Men had courted her with flowery compliments and grand gestures, yet none had made her feel as safe as this taciturn cowboy with his straightforward kindness. Lewiston appeared on the horizon as the sun began its westward descent, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along the stagecoach route. Despite its small size, the sight of civilization brought relief flooding through Ophelia's weary body. "Mr. Bradley," she began, uncertain how to express her gratitude. "Owen," he corrected quietly. "Owen," Ophelia repeated, finding she liked the sound of his name. "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. No debt between us," he replied simply as they approached the town limits. "Just doing what's right." The Frontier Hotel stood at the center of Lewiston's Main Street, a two-story wooden structure that had seen better days, but remained the finest accommodation the small town had to offer. Owen helped Ophelia dismount, supporting her weight as her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. Mrs. Thornton, the hotel's proprietress, took one look at Ophelia's bedraggled appearance and Owen's protective stance and ushered them inside without question. "Land's sakes, child, you look half dead." "Stagecoach robbery, was it? We heard about that business 2 days ago." Owen explained the situation in his economical way while Mrs. Thornton clucked sympathetically. "Rooms on the house for the young lady," she declared. "Least we can do for someone who's suffered such an ordeal." "I couldn't possibly," Ophelia began, but Mrs. Thornton waved away her protest. "Nonsense. It's what neighbors do in these parts. Now, let's get you a hot bath and some clean clothes. I've got a dress my daughter left behind that should fit you well enough." Owen placed Ophelia's hand on Mrs. Thornton's arm. "She needs food. Light broth first, then something more substantial if she keeps it down." The older woman nodded. "Not my first time caring for someone who's been through the wilderness, Mr. Bradley. She'll be looked after properly." Owen tipped his hat. "I'll see to my horse, then check if there's word on those raiders." Panic flared in Ophelia's eyes at the thought of his departure. "You're leaving?" Something flickered across his typically stoic features, surprise, perhaps, at her reaction. "Just to the sheriff's office and livery. I'll return before supper." Relief washed over her, followed by embarrassment at her display of dependence. "Of course. Thank you again, Mr. Owen." Mrs. Thornton led Ophelia upstairs to a small but clean room with a real bed, a luxury that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. True to her word, the kindly proprietress arranged for a hot bath and a borrowed dress of faded blue calico that hung slightly loose on Ophelia's frame, but felt heavenly compared to her ruined garments. As promised, Owen returned before the supper hour, having bathed and changed into a clean shirt himself. The simple act of grooming had transformed him from trail-worn tracker to a strikingly handsome man whose quiet intensity drew more than one admiring glance from the ladies in the hotel dining room. "Sheriff says the raiders crossed into Blackfoot territory," he reported as they shared a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread. "Army patrol's been notified, but your belongings are likely gone for good." Ophelia nodded, having already resigned herself to that probability. "At least I'm alive to start anew." She managed a small smile. "Thanks to you." Owen shifted uncomfortably under her gratitude. "Telegram came for you. School board in Helena heard about the raid. They're sending funds for your journey and accommodations once you're well enough to travel." Hope blossomed in Ophelia's chest. "Then my position is still secure?" "Terms delayed 2 weeks on account of a fever outbreak. You've time to recover." For the first time since the robbery, Ophelia felt her spirits truly lift. Providence works in mysterious ways. "Had I arrived on schedule, I might have fallen ill myself." Owen studied her for a moment, curiosity evident in his normally guarded expression. Most women would be reconsidering their decision to stay in Montana after such an experience. "I'm not most women, Mr. Bradley." Ophelia lifted her chin. "Hardship is not exclusive to the Western Territories. I've faced my share in Boston as well, never suggested otherwise." The ghost of a smile touched his lips again. "Territory could use more people with your spirit." The simple compliment warmed Ophelia more than the hearty stew before her. "And what of you? Will you return to tracking the moment I'm safely established in Lewiston?" Owen hesitated, the question catching him off guard. "That's the job. It seems a solitary life. It suits me." Yet something in his tone suggested uncertainty, as though he was only now considering the isolation of his chosen path. "Well, I'm grateful our paths crossed, however briefly." Ophelia meant the words sincerely, surprised by her reluctance to see this quiet, honorable man ride away. Over the next 3 days, Ophelia regained her strength under Mrs. Thornton's motherly care. Owen remained in Lewiston, ostensibly to monitor reports of the raiders, but more often found in Ophelia's company. Their conversations grew longer, his responses less terse as a tentative friendship formed between them. On her 3rd evening in Lewiston, Owen escorted Ophelia on a short walk through the town, her arm tucked into his for support. The setting sun painted the modest buildings in hues of gold and amber, transforming the frontier settlement into something almost magical. "It's beautiful in its own way, isn't it?" Ophelia mused, observing the activity around them: shopkeepers closing for the day, children playing in the dusty street, cowboys gathering at the saloon. Different from Boston, but alive with possibility. Owen nodded, his gaze not on the town but on her face, illuminated by the fading sunlight. "Seen plenty of settlements come and go. The ones that survive have heart, people who believe in building something lasting." "Is that what you want, Owen? Something lasting?" The question slipped out before Ophelia could consider its implication. He was silent for so long she feared she'd overstepped. Finally he spoke, his voice rougher than usual. "Never gave it much thought before, always been about the next job, the next trail." His eyes met hers. "Starting to think differently these past few days." The admission hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Ophelia's heart quickened, aware they stood at a crossroads neither had anticipated. "The stage for Helena leaves tomorrow morning," Owen said, breaking the moment. "Sheriff says the route's been cleared, should be safe passage." "Oh," disappointment settled in Ophelia's chest. "Yes, I suppose I should continue my journey." "I'll escort you." The offer came quickly, almost urgently, safer with company. Relief and something warmer flooded through her. "I would appreciate that greatly." As they turned back toward the hotel, Owen's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, the brief contact sending a current of awareness through them both. Neither spoke of it, but something fundamental had shifted between them, fragile and new yet undeniably real. Morning dawned clear and bright, the stagecoach waiting outside the hotel as Ophelia descended the stairs in her borrowed dress, clutching the small bundle of necessities Mrs. Thornton had insisted she take. Owen stood in the lobby, hat in hand, his horse already saddled outside. "No need to ride alongside the stage," Ophelia said, though her heart hoped he would disagree. "I'm sure you have more important duties." "Nothing more important at present." The simplicity of his statement belied its significance. "Besides, promise to see you safely to Helena, Mrs." Thornton watched their exchange with knowing eyes. "Take care of our schoolteacher, Mr. Bradley. Don't see many young ladies with her kind of fortitude out here." The journey to Helena would take 2 days with an overnight stop at a way station. Owen rode alongside the stagecoach, occasionally catching Ophelia's eye through the window and tipping his hat in a gesture that increasingly felt like a private communication between them. The stagecoach carried 2 other passengers, a middle-aged merchant returning to Helena, and a young miner headed to the gold fields farther west. Both men attempted conversation with Ophelia, but her responses remained politely distant, her thoughts occupied by the quiet man riding exterior guard. At midday, they stopped to change horses and take a brief meal. Owen dismounted, extending a hand to help Ophelia down from the coach. "Holding up all right." "Much better than my last journey," she replied with a smile. "Amazing what difference proper provisions and company can make." They shared a simple meal of cold chicken and cornbread, sitting slightly apart from the other passengers. Ophelia found herself studying Owen's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the weather-worn creases around his eyes that deepened when he almost smiled. "Tell me about Helena," she requested. What should a newcomer expect, growing fast since the gold strike? Rough in parts but decent folks trying to build something worthwhile. Owen considered her thoughtfully. "Schools in the newer section, families there want education for their children, you'll be welcome. And you?" "Do you visit Helena often?" he shrugged. "When the job takes me there, territorial office is based in the city." Ophelia hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered in her mind. "Where do you call home, Owen, when you're not following trails across Montana?" Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes before he glanced away. "Got a small cabin outside Lewiston, nothing fancy, somewhere to winter when the pass is close." The image of Owen alone in a remote cabin during Montana's harsh winter months tugged at Ophelia's heart. It must get lonely. "Got used to it." He met her gaze again. "Never minded solitude before." The implication of his words that something had changed hung between them as the stagecoach driver called for passengers to reboard. By sunset, they reached Miller's Way Station, little more than a sturdy log structure offering basic overnight accommodation for stage passengers. The proprietor, a grizzled former trapper named Miller, provided a simple supper and separate sleeping quarters divided by thin walls that did little to ensure privacy. Ophelia lay awake long after the other passengers had fallen asleep, listening to the unfamiliar night sounds of the Montana wilderness. Through the thin wall, she could hear Owen's even breathing in the adjoining room, the knowledge of his proximity both comforting and unsettling. Tomorrow they would reach Helena, and their paths would likely diverge. The thought brought an unexpected ache to her chest. In less than a week, this quiet, honorable man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Morning came too quickly. As they resumed their journey, the landscape gradually changed, rolling hills giving way to the more dramatic terrain surrounding Helena. By mid-afternoon, the stagecoach crested a rise, revealing the bustling mining town spread across the valley below. "There she is," the driver announced. "Helena, Queen City of the Rockies." Ophelia leaned forward, taking in her first view of the place that would become her home. Unlike Lewiston's modest size, Helena sprawled impressively across the landscape, its buildings ranging from crude miners' shacks to substantial brick structures that spoke of permanence and prosperity. Owen rode up alongside the coach window. "First impression." "It's larger than I expected," Ophelia admitted. "More established, gold-brought people, some stayed to build." There was approval in his tone. "Schools in the West End, newer part of town." The stagecoach rattled down the hill, entering the outskirts of Helena. Ophelia's excitement mingled with apprehension and a growing sadness at the imminent farewell to her unlikely protector. The stage depot bustled with activity when they arrived. Owen dismounted swiftly, helping Ophelia down from the coach before the other passengers. His hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary, the brief contact speaking volumes. "School board president's name is Whitcomb," Owen said, retrieving a paper from his vest pocket. "His address, said to bring you directly there upon arrival." Ophelia accepted the paper, her fingers brushing his. "Will you accompany me?" Something complicated passed across Owen's features. "Best if you meet your employers without a trail-worn tracker in tow. First impressions matter." Disappointment washed through her, though she recognized the wisdom in his words. "Then I suppose this is farewell." Owen shifted, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Need to report to the territorial office while I'm here. Be in town at least until morning." Hope fluttered in Ophelia's chest. "Perhaps we could meet for supper. I'd like to thank you properly for everything you've done." "No thanks needed." Yet his expression softened. "Montana Hotel at 7, they serve a decent meal. I'll be there." Ophelia smiled, relieved their parting wouldn't be immediate. A hired carriage took Ophelia to the impressive home of Harold Whitcomb, president of Helena's school board. The middle-aged banker and his wife welcomed her with genuine concern upon hearing of her ordeal. "My dear Miss Sinclair, what a terrible introduction to our territory, Mrs. Whitcomb exclaimed. "We were beside ourselves when word came about the stagecoach robbery. Fortunately, I was rescued by a territorial tracker," Ophelia explained. "Mr. Bradley showed extraordinary kindness." "Owen Bradley," Mr. Whitcomb's eyebrows rose. "Well, that is fortunate indeed. Man's reputation as a tracker is unmatched, though he's not known for sociability." "He was most considerate," Ophelia defended, feeling oddly protective. "I owe him my life." Mrs. Whitcomb studied Ophelia's expression with interest. "Well, we're certainly grateful he found you. Now, let's get you settled. We've arranged temporary accommodations with the Peterson family. They live just 2 doors from the schoolhouse. Once you're established, we'll help you find more permanent lodgings." By early evening, Ophelia had been introduced to the Peterson family, a kindly couple with 3 school-aged children who welcomed her warmly, and shown the schoolhouse, where she would begin teaching in 2 weeks' time. The solid brick building with its rows of desks and ample windows exceeded her expectations, as did the community's obvious commitment to education. At precisely 7 o'clock, Ophelia entered the dining room of the Montana Hotel, her borrowed dress replaced by a simple but new blue gown purchased with the funds the school board had provided. Owen stood as she approached their table, his usual trail clothes exchanged for a clean white shirt and dark vest that transformed his appearance from rugged frontiersman to striking gentleman. "You look well," he said, the simple compliment warming her more than effusive praise might have. "As do you," Ophelia smiled as he held her chair. "Helena agrees with you, just cleaned up a bit." He seemed almost embarrassed by her notice. "How was your meeting with the school board?" Throughout dinner, Ophelia shared her impressions of Helena and the school, her natural animation returning as excitement about her new position overcame the lingering effects of her ordeal. Owen listened attentively, offering occasional observations about the town and its inhabitants. "The Petersons seem lovely," she concluded, "though Mrs. Whitcomb mentioned helping me find my own lodgings once I'm established. Peterson's a good man. Wife's from back east, originally Pennsylvania, I think. They'll make you feel at home." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Owen spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Got word at the territorial office. Need to head north tomorrow. Army needs trackers for a situation near Fort Benton." Though she'd expected it, disappointment still lanced through Ophelia's heart. "I see. When might you return to Helena?" "Hard to say. Could be weeks. Depends on what we find." He met her gaze directly. "Would write if you'd welcome correspondence." The offer surprised and delighted her. "I would like that very much." Something shifted in Owen's expression, relief perhaps, or resolve. "Never been much for letter writing, might not be good at it." "I don't need flowery prose, Owen." Ophelia's smile was gentle. "Just knowing you're safe would mean a great deal to me." He nodded, a decision apparently made. "First letter might be a while, depending where we end up. I'll watch for it whenever it arrives." As they walked back toward the Peterson home after dinner, the streets of Helena alive with the sounds of a frontier town in evening, Owen offered his arm. Ophelia took it, acutely aware that this simple contact would soon be a memory rather than a daily occurrence. "Thank you," she said suddenly, stopping beneath a street lamp that cast a warm glow over them both. "Not just for saving my life, though I'll be eternally grateful for that. Thank you for showing me kindness when I was at my most vulnerable." Owen's expression softened in the lamplight. "Didn't do anything special." "You did to me." Ophelia gathered her courage. "I've never met anyone quite like you, Owen Bradley." Something powerful passed between them, a recognition of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. For a breathless moment, Ophelia thought he might kiss her, and realized with startling clarity that she wanted him to. Instead, Owen gently squeezed her hand where it rested on his arm. "Best get you home before the Petersons worry." The moment passed, but its impact lingered as they completed their walk in companionable silence. At the Petersons' gate, Owen removed his hat, holding it against his chest in a gesture of respect. "Safe journey, Owen," Ophelia said softly. "I'll await your letter. Take care, Ophelia." Her name on his lips felt like a caress. "Helena's lucky to have you." With a tip of his hat, he turned and walked away, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the gathering darkness. Ophelia watched until he was out of sight, a curious mixture of sadness and hope filling her heart. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Ophelia prepared for the start of the school term. The fever that had delayed classes subsided, allowing families to return to normal routines. Ophelia threw herself into organizing the classroom, developing lesson plans, and meeting her future students and their parents. Helena proved to be a fascinating mix of frontier roughness and emerging civilization. Though gold had initially drawn people to the area, many had stayed to establish businesses and build community. The school's 43 students ranged from 6 to 16 years of age, with varying levels of previous education. Each day, Ophelia found herself scanning the faces of riders passing through town, hoping to glimpse a familiar figure. Each evening, she inquired whether any mail had arrived for her. The Petersons noticed her anticipation but asked no questions, their kindness extending to respecting her privacy. 3 weeks after Owen's departure, the first letter arrived, a single sheet of paper covered in a surprisingly elegant hand that belied its author's rugged exterior. "Miss Sinclair, reached Fort Benton safely. Army has us tracking a group believed responsible for attacks on settlements near the Canadian border, weather holding for now. Hope this finds you well and settled in Helena. Peterson's youngest boy has trouble with reading technique that helped my sister was having him read aloud daily, even just a paragraph. Respectfully, O. Bradley." The brevity made Ophelia smile, so characteristic of the man himself. Yet the personal observation about the Peterson boy revealed his attentiveness, and the mention of his sister offered a rare glimpse into his past. She penned a response that evening, sharing stories of her first days teaching and life in Helena, careful not to overwhelm with length but wanting to give him a window into her new world. A pattern emerged over the following weeks. Owen's letters arrived irregularly, sometimes 2 weeks apart, sometimes a month, always brief, yet increasingly revealing small pieces of himself. Ophelia learned of his Kentucky childhood, his parents' small farm, his sister lost to illness. She shared her own history in return: her father's death at Gettysburg, her brother's struggles after the war, her decision to seek independence and purpose in the West. October brought the first snowfall to Helena, and a letter bearing news that Owen would return to Lewiston before winter closed the mountain passes. Ophelia read the simple sentence announcing his imminent proximity multiple times, her heart quickening at the possibility of seeing him again. "Would be pleased to call on you when next in Helena, if agreeable," he wrote in his characteristically direct style. Her response, sent immediately, conveyed perhaps more enthusiasm than propriety dictated, but Ophelia found herself caring less about Eastern conventions with each passing day in Montana. November arrived with bitter winds, and the news that several students' families would be moving to Helena for the winter months, swelling her classroom population. Among them was the Thornton family from Lewiston, Mrs. Thornton's daughter Caroline, son-in-law, and their 3 children. "Miss Sinclair," Mrs. Thornton exclaimed upon seeing Ophelia at the general store. "What a pleasure to see you looking so well, a far cry from that half-starved girl who arrived on my doorstep." "Mrs. Thornton, what a wonderful surprise." Ophelia embraced the older woman warmly. "I didn't know you'd be wintering in Helena. My daughter insisted we join them this year. Her husband's business keeps them here through the cold months." Mrs. Thornton's shrewd eyes assessed Ophelia. "You've settled in nicely, I see, and what of Mr. Bradley? Does he call when in town?" Ophelia felt a blush warm her cheeks. We correspond. He's been north with the army these past months. Mrs. Thornton's knowing smile suggested she'd observed more than Ophelia realized during those days in Lewiston. A fine man, if somewhat solitary. Needs someone to remind him there's more to life than tracking trails and chasing outlaws. Before Ophelia could respond, Mrs. Thornton continued, "We'll be hosting a small gathering to celebrate Thanksgiving. You must join us and perhaps Mr. Bradley too if he's returned by then." The invitation brought both excitement and apprehension. Would Owen return in time? Would he accept such a social invitation if he did? Their correspondence had deepened their connection, but Ophelia remained uncertain how that might translate to a renewed in-person acquaintance. The answer came 3 days before Thanksgiving in the form of Owen himself, appearing at the schoolhouse door as Ophelia dismissed her students for the day. Her heart leaped at the sight of him broader than she remembered, his face more tanned, but his eyes still that same remarkable blue that had haunted her dreams. "Owen," she couldn't disguise her delight, "you're back. Got in yesterday." He removed his hat, revealing hair that had grown slightly longer during his absence. "Hope it's not an intrusion." "Not at all." The classroom suddenly felt too small, too confined for the emotions surging through her. "I've missed your letters." Something softened in his expression. "Missed writing them, and their recipient." The simple admission sent warmth cascading through Ophelia. "Mrs. Thornton is in Helena. She's invited us both to Thanksgiving dinner if you'll be in town. Plan to head back to Lewiston tomorrow." He hesitated. "Could delay if you'd like company at this dinner." "I would like that very much." The Thorntons' Thanksgiving celebration brought together a dozen guests in their comfortable Helena home. Ophelia arrived wearing her best dress, a deep green wool that complemented her eyes and chestnut hair. Owen met her at the Petersons', his usual trail clothes replaced by a proper suit that transformed his appearance while somehow emphasizing his inherent ruggedness. "You look beautiful," he said simply as she opened the door, the directness of his compliment more affecting than elaborate flattery. Throughout dinner, Ophelia was acutely aware of Owen beside her, his quiet attentiveness, the occasional brush of his arm against hers, the way his eyes sought hers during conversation. Mrs. Thornton observed them with undisguised approval, skillfully drawing Owen into discussions that revealed more of his character to the gathered company. "Mr. Bradley tracked down my husband's stolen horses last spring," Caroline's husband explained to the table. "Followed signs no one else could see for nearly 100 miles, returned with every animal intact." "Just doing my job," Owen demurred, uncomfortable with the attention. "The territorial governor himself has commended Mr. Bradley's work," Mrs. Thornton added. "I understand he's offered you a more permanent position with the territorial offices here in Helena, hasn't he?" Ophelia turned to Owen in surprise. "You never mentioned that in your letters." A flush crept up his neck. "Only came up recently, haven't decided yet." "What sort of position?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral despite the hope blooming in her chest. "Training new trackers, coordinating between army patrols and territorial law enforcement." Owen shifted in his seat. "Would mean less time on the trail, more time in Helena." The implications hung between them as conversation flowed around the table. After dinner, while others gathered in the parlor, Owen gestured toward the porch. "Could use some air. Would you join me?" The November night was crisp but not unbearable, the sky above Helena scattered with brilliant stars. They stood side by side at the porch railing, breath misting in the cold air. "Why didn't you mention the governor's offer in your letters?" Ophelia asked gently. Owen was silent for a long moment. Wasn't sure what it meant, still figuring that out. "What do you mean?" He turned to face her, more uncertainty in his expression than she'd ever seen. "Been on my own a long time. Solitary life suited me, or thought it did. Then found a half-starved schoolteacher under a cottonwood tree and everything shifted." Ophelia's heart quickened. "Shifted how?" "Letters became the best part of my weeks." His voice roughened. Found myself thinking about Helena more than Lewiston, about having reasons to stay in one place. What reasons? Ophelia whispered, scarcely daring to hope she understood his meaning. Owen's gaze held her steadily. You know the reason, Ophelia, must have seen it in my letters, even if I'm not good with words. I'd like to hear it directly, she said, gathering her courage. No misunderstandings between us. He took her hand, his calloused fingers enveloping hers with gentle strength. Never expected to find someone who'd matter more than the next trail, then there you were. His thumb traced circles on her palm. These months of letters, getting to know your mind, your heart, never known anyone like you. Ophelia stepped closer, emboldened by his words. I believe I started falling in love with you the day you fed me from your saddlebag without a word. She smiled at his surprised expression. A man's actions reveal his character more clearly than any declaration. Love. Owen tested the word as though it were unfamiliar territory. That's what this is, then. Been so long since I felt anything like it, almost didn't recognize it. And now that you do, Ophelia asked softly. In answer, Owen drew her gently into his arms, one hand cradling her face with unexpected tenderness. Now I'm thinking permanent positions in Helena have considerable appeal. When he kissed her, it was with the same quiet certainty that characterized everything about him, deliberate yet passionate, restrained yet revealing depths of feeling that words could never adequately express. Ophelia responded with all the emotion that had built during their months of correspondence, her arms encircling his neck as she surrendered to the rightness of being in his embrace. I love you, Ophelia Sinclair, Owen murmured against her lips when they finally parted. Have for longer than I realized. And I love you, Owen Bradley. The declaration felt both monumental and utterly natural, enough to hope you'll accept the governor's offer. A rare, full smile transformed his features. Already did, starts after New Year. Joy surged through Ophelia. You decided to stay in Helena. When? Moment I saw you standing in that schoolroom 3 days ago. His expression grew serious. Need to be clear about something. Life with me won't be easy. Still have demons from the war. Still more comfortable in wilderness than drawing rooms. I didn't come west expecting easy, Ophelia replied, touching his face gently. I came seeking purpose and meaning, found both and you besides. They returned to the gathering inside with nothing announced but much revealed in their expressions. Mrs. Thornton's knowing smile suggested she'd anticipated this development since Lewiston, while the other guests observed the subtle change in the formerly solitary tracker with varying degrees of surprise and approval. The weeks that followed brought rapid changes to both their lives. Owen secured lodgings in Helena while beginning the transition to his new role. He called on Ophelia properly, taking her to church socials, community gatherings, and quiet dinners where they continued deepening their understanding of each other. 2 days before Christmas, during a walk through snow-covered Helena, Owen stopped beneath the same street lamp where they'd nearly kissed months before. This time he knelt in the snow, producing a small wooden box from his coat pocket. Not good with fancy speeches, he said, looking up at her with unguarded emotion. But no, I want to build something lasting with you if you'll have me. The ring inside was a simple gold band with a single small diamond, modest yet perfect. My mother's, Owen explained. Only thing I kept when I left Kentucky. Tears of joy blurred Ophelia's vision. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Owen. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in Helena's newly constructed church, Mrs. Thornton effectively appointing herself wedding coordinator. Ophelia wore a gown of ivory satin sent by her brother Thomas, who wrote that he would visit in the spring once travel became easier. Owen stood tall in a new suit, his usual reserve softened by undisguised happiness, as they spoke their vows before friends who had become family in this frontier community. The school board granted Ophelia permission to continue teaching after her marriage, an unusual but practical arrangement in a territory where qualified instructors were scarce. The newlyweds moved into a small house near both the school and the territorial offices, combining Owen's sparse belongings with Ophelia's growing collection of books and teaching materials. Spring brought Thomas Sinclair's promised visit, the former Union soldier finding unexpected camaraderie with Owen despite their different backgrounds. The two men spent long evenings discussing their shared experiences of war and its aftermath, conversations that helped heal lingering wounds in both. "You found a good man," Thomas told his sister before departing. "Never thought I'd see you settled in Montana territory, but you seem more alive here than you ever did in Boston." "I am," Ophelia agreed, watching from their porch as Owen chopped wood in the yard. "Sometimes the most unexpected paths lead exactly where we're meant to be." Summer arrived with news that Owen's training program for territorial trackers had been expanded, earning commendation from officials in Washington. Ophelia's school term ended successfully, with plans to add an assistant teacher for the growing student population in the fall. In August, as they celebrated the first anniversary of their meeting the day Owen found a half-starved stranger beneath a cottonwood tree, Ophelia shared news of her own. "I'll need to request a substitute for the spring term," she said as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint Helena's buildings in gold. "Our family will be expanding around then." Owen's expression transformed from confusion to wonder as he understood her meaning. "A baby." "You're certain?" Ophelia nodded, laughing as he lifted her from her chair in a careful embrace. "Quite certain. Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday." That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Owen's hand rested protectively over Ophelia's still flat stomach. "Never imagined having a family of my own," he confessed. "After the war, figured some men weren't meant for that kind of happiness." "And now," Ophelia asked, covering his hand with hers, "now I know better." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You taught me that." Their son, William Thomas Bradley, was born in April 1878, his lusty cries announcing a healthy constitution that matched his father's strength and his mother's determination. Owen, who had faced armed raiders and hostile elements without flinching, appeared thoroughly terrified by the tiny infant placed in his arms. "He's so small," he whispered, awe evident in his voice. "But strong," Ophelia assured him, exhausted but radiant. "Like his father." As spring blossomed across Montana territory, the Bradley family established new routines. Owen adjusted his working hours to spend more time at home, often carrying his son in a sling across his chest as he reviewed reports and maps in their parlor. Ophelia discovered that motherhood, while demanding, brought unexpected fulfillment that complemented rather than replaced her passion for teaching. By William's first birthday, Helena had grown substantially, its status as territorial capital bringing increased population and development. The Bradleys' position in the community had likewise evolved Owen's work protecting settlements and training a new generation of territorial defenders, earning widespread respect, while Ophelia's commitment to education made her a valued voice in civic discussions. "Remember when we met?" Ophelia asked one evening as they sat on their expanded porch, William sleeping peacefully in Owen's arms while the setting sun gilded Helena's rooftops. "I was half dead under that cottonwood tree. Remember every detail," Owen replied, his free hand finding hers. "The way you looked at me when you first opened your eyes, how you tried to be brave despite everything. And you fed me from your saddlebag without a word." Ophelia smiled at the memory. "I thought you were the most intimidating man I'd ever encountered." A rare chuckle rumbled from Owen's chest, careful not to disturb their sleeping son. "And now I know you're the most compassionate." She leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing through her, though still a man of few words. "Some things don't need saying." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But I'll say this anyway, loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life, Ophelia Bradley. Better than tracking outlaws across 3 territories," she teased. "No comparison." His expression grew serious. You saved me as surely as I saved you that day. Just took longer to realize it. As night fell over Helena, bringing with it the first stars of evening, Ophelia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment, from a desperate encounter in the wilderness to the rich, fulfilling life they'd built together. Every hardship had led them here, every challenge overcome had strengthened the bond between them. "I love you, Owen Bradley," she whispered, the simple declaration encompassing a world of meaning. His arm tightened around her shoulders, his response characteristically brief, yet containing all the certainty and devotion that had defined their relationship from its earliest days. "Always will," he replied, the two words a promise as vast and enduring as the Montana sky spreading above their home. In the years that followed, the Bradleys watched Helena transform from frontier outpost to established city, their family growing alongside the community they helped build. Two more children joined William Elizabeth in 1880 and James in 1883, each inheriting some combination of Owen's quiet strength and Ophelia's passionate determination. Owen eventually became Chief Marshal for Montana when it achieved statehood in 1889, his experience and integrity making him the natural choice to oversee law enforcement in the new state. Ophelia continued teaching until she was appointed the first female superintendent of Helena's expanded school system in 1890, her innovative approaches to education earning recognition throughout the Northwest. Their children grew up hearing the story of their parents' extraordinary meeting of a half-starved schoolteacher and the taciturn tracker who saved her life with silent kindness. It became family legend, a testament to the unexpected ways love could transform even the most solitary hearts. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1902, surrounded by their grown children and a community that had become extended family, Owen and Ophelia returned to Lewiston, retracing the journey that had first brought them together. Though the town had changed and the specific cottonwood tree was long gone, the essential landscape remained, a living reminder of their beginning. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't found me that day?" Ophelia asked as they stood on the rise overlooking the valley. Owen considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "No," he finally said, taking her hand as naturally as breathing. "Some things are meant to be, no matter what path gets you there." Ophelia smiled, recognizing the profound truth in his simple words. Their love story had begun with hunger and silence, with one human being recognizing another's need and responding without hesitation or expectation. From that pure act of compassion had grown a bond that sustained them through decades of challenge, and changed a love as enduring as the Montana landscape that had witnessed its birth. "Some things are meant to be," she agreed, leaning into the solid strength that had been her constant for 25 years. "And I'm grateful every day that ours was among them." As the sunset painted the western sky in the same golden hues that had illuminated their first meeting, Owen and Ophelia Bradley stood together on the Montana soil that had transformed from hostile wilderness to beloved home. Their journey from strangers to soulmates, from solitude to family, stood as testament to love's power to find us when we least expect it, often in the most unlikely circumstances. And just as Owen had once offered nourishment without words to a starving stranger, their love continued to sustain them with a quiet certainty that required no grand declarations, only the steady devotion of two hearts that had found in each other exactly what they hadn't known they were seeking.